Does your narcissistic partner's parents seem strangely familiar? More than likely, it's because they have the same characteristics as your parents. Stay tuned for the video. Okay, so the in-laws, or if you're not married to your narcissistic partner, maybe just, potential in-laws, right? Okay, this is the thing or the phenomena that often we completely overlook. And this is understandable because we're creatures of habit. So a lot of the things that we do, or even the things that the behaviors that we engage in, the things that we choose, the people that we choose, the places that we choose, yes, all of that is deriving from the programming from the subconscious mind. So therefore, we're usually unconscious to a lot of the things that we do, to a lot of the things that we choose. The people, the places, the things, again, that we choose, usually is unconscious. So if you're the person who was scapegoated growing up in your family, okay, first, my heart goes out to you. Secondly, 9 times out of 10 chances, when you chose your narcissistic partner, it was unconsciously. Now, not to scold, not to insult. That's not my intention. What I'm pointing out is when we go out, this is just anyone in general. When we go out and we pick partners, I've done this. We choose somebody we're attracted to, but it's not always conscious or understood by ourselves why we're very attracted to that person. Not everything. Of course, the obvious is they're tall, maybe they're muscular, maybe they're athletic, they may smell great, okay? They may look good. We may like the sound of their voice. All these things are, obvious. But the things that are not so obvious, this is how some of us were actually ensnared by the narcissistic partner. It's what we weren't conscious to, not what we were conscious to. So when it comes to the in-laws of your narcissistic partner, if you're married to him or her, if you take a careful look, if you pay just a little bit more attention, you're gonna find that your in-laws have a characteristic similar to your parents. Because we're creatures of habit. So we seek out what's familiar to us, even if it's traumatic, even if it doesn't serve us, even if it's very painful. So if I choose a narcissistic partner, more than likely it's because that narcissistic partner reminds me of my parents or my grandparents or aunt and uncle, okay, that may have a cluster personality type, such as a narcissistic personality. Okay, they had some major influences in my life when I was growing up. And we all do this in general. So your in-laws more than likely have the same characteristics as your parents, especially if you were the person that was tagged as a scapegoat growing up in your family. Again, we are creatures of habit. So this also means for your narcissistic partner, when they choose partners, when they chose you or anyone else, they're looking for what's familiar, just like you did. So y'all ended up choosing each other. But again, you weren't really conscious as to why. Certain things, of course, you knew why. Again, things that appeal to you about that person, their scent, the way they dance, the way they speak, the way they move, the way they kiss. These things are obvious. But again, in this video, I'm really talking about what's not obvious, the unconscious aspect of choosing the narcissistic partner. So when you take a look at how your in-laws treat you, yeah, if you really think about it, it's eerily familiar, strangely familiar. They tend to treat you like your parents treated you when you were growing up. This is not an accident. Because we're creatures of habit, we seek out the scenarios in life that are very familiar, even if it's traumatic, even if it's painful, even if it's something that doesn't serve us in the long run. So if a person is accustomed to being the scapegoat in all of their relationships, okay, or they unconsciously choose the dysfunctional role of scapegoat, yeah, they tend to do this with all of their relationships. So this is not going to exclude the romantic partnerships. When he or she goes out and they look for a partner, they're going to seek to play the same dysfunctional role. But again, it's going to be unconsciously. All right, so we tend to do a lot of things unconsciously. It's kind of scary how a lot of us in general, we do things unconsciously, but this does not exclude picking a partner. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out because this is something that I've noticed along my journey. I really think we should talk about this. There are more and more people that's becoming more vocal and open about their experiences, even with the in-laws of their narcissistic partner. Okay, now one of the things that's very familiar is the discomfort of being around those particular in-laws. And that we can joke and laugh about, not liking the mother-in-law so much or not liking the father-in-law. But there's a lot of TV programs that we have seen that, it places a comedic aspect on not liking the mother-in-law. But maybe this is more common than we think. So if your narcissistic dad reminds you of your narcissistic father-in-law, yeah, this is something that escapes a lot of us. But it can be eerily familiar. If one becomes aware and more conscious to that particular dynamic, it can be mind-blowing. If your narcissistic mom reminds you of your narcissistic mother-in-law, again, this is by design. And this is another way, possibly another way, that the universe is asking you or trying to get you to become aware of this pattern that you have adopted, okay, or you have continued to select. This is a pattern that a lot of us continue to select, or we continue to unconsciously claim, which is a dysfunctional role, like of scapegoat. If we grew up with that, well, as adults, we're probably going to continue with that pattern. Now, this doesn't let the narcissist off the hook, not by any means. When he or she goes out and they're looking for a partner, even friends, okay, or someone that they want to get in a relationship with, they tend to look for what's familiar. They tend to look for people that can help them to continue to experience what they have always experienced. And that is being an emotional bully, being the person who is manipulative. All these other traits that cluster B personality types are notorious for. Okay, and there's some cluster B personality types, they have become aware of this. So they are getting some sort of support and treatment for their personality. But I digress. Different people, different faces, different places, same scenario. Because we are creatures of habit. We unconsciously seek what we are familiar with. So if you growing up were tagged as the scapegoat within your family, do not be surprised that your narcissistic in-laws are just that. They have narcissistic personalities. They have a cluster B personality type, such as histrionic, borderline, okay, antisocial, or even narcissistic personality, right? Again, just pick any of the four: narcissistic, borderline, histrionic, or antisocial. Whichever type your in-laws fall into, okay, this applies. This overall message in this video applies to you. If you just take a look, just step back, and you will find that more than likely your in-laws remind you so much of your own parents, and they tend to treat you the same way that your parents treated you when you grew up. Your parents who have a cluster B personality type. All right, so while growing up, if you were tagged to play the dysfunctional role of scapegoat, then more than likely that is a dysfunctional role that you may continue to unconsciously seek to play in all of your relationships. So when it comes down to your in-laws, this is not going to be different, because it's not going to be any different. Now, this is not to scold you. I wanted to do this video and just point that out, because this is something that a lot of us do and we're not conscious to it. Because I've been in situations where, okay, you know what, I wonder why I'm going through this again. Well, first of all, because I didn't learn the valuable lesson. And that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just means that I didn't get the valuable lesson. So we tend to repeat scenarios in our lives that have a valuable lesson for us, okay, unless we learn that lesson. So what I found out was once I learned that lesson, I didn't have to repeat that scenario. And guess what? Now that I reflect on it, I never had to repeat a scenario ever thus far once I learned a lesson. So when it comes down to our relationships and the type of people we find ourselves surrounded by, well, a lot of the times this is because we unconsciously seek to play a particular role in all of our relationships. Because when we were growing up, right, when we were children, we became familiar with playing that role. Whether somebody emotionally bullied us into playing it, forced us into playing it, or what have you. But the bottom line is, creatures of habit, we human beings tend to be. When we picked our partner, it was more than likely unconsciously. Now, I'm not saying everybody does this, but a lot of us do. We tend to look on the surface when it comes to our partners, but then we learn more about him or her in the relationship as the relationship goes on, which is that's fine and well. I've done that, okay? So I'm the last person that can judge. But here's the thing about narcissistic in-laws that to me is a little creepy. And it's like, and it is this. This is the thing that really creeps me out a little bit. It's almost as if they know exactly the right buttons to push. What will make you afraid? What will make you nervous? Okay? They tend to really amplify that. What makes you uncomfortable? It's almost as if they were there when you were growing up. Pretty eerie. Yeah, pretty eerie stuff. But I wanted to point this out again because I think this is very common. But it really escapes a lot of us. Okay? We tend to unconsciously seek out the people, places, and things that we are already familiar with, that we're so accustomed to, even if it doesn't serve us, even if it's not very healthy, even if it can actually cause us trauma. Now, does this mean that we're doomed and gloomed to this? Of course not. Any habit can be broken if given the effort. Now, I don't mean to make this sound like you just follow some steps and that's it, you know, done, over, you know, it's problem solved. No, it takes time. It takes, especially when we're talking about narcissistic abuse. It takes time, it takes effort to overcome it. In order to continue to thrive forward, first of all, we have to become aware. Okay, just being aware of certain things, such as what I just stated. When you find yourself surrounded by certain people that have a particular type of personality, it's probably time to become a little bit more aware or conscious to what you're selecting, who you're selecting. What are you inviting into your life? Who are you inviting into your life? Because 9 out of 10 chances is stemming from the subconscious mind programming that you're running. Again, of which you're probably unconscious to. Now, in order for me to have broken some of my habits, such as having narcissistic relationships, first of all, I had to become aware. Some of you have experienced how your narcissistic partner doesn't tend to take up for you. Not saying that you need them to protect you necessarily, but when it's either your parents who have a cluster B personality type or their parents who has a cluster B personality type tend to say or do something that makes you uncomfortable. Ever notice how your partner just sits by and watches? That's not by accident. Because your narcissistic partner, 9 times out of 10 chances, they were chosen as the golden child. So when they go out and they pick their partners, you or anyone else, your narcissistic partner will unconsciously seek to continue to experience what he or she has experienced since childhood. And some of them may have been spoiled. Now, some people may argue or debate that, you know, that's not a form of mistreatment of a child when you spoil them. But just think of the term or the expression spoiled rotten. Some people will debate that all day long, all night long, that you cannot mistreat a child by spoiling them. Well, the phrase spoiled rotten continues to come to mind. Some who have a narcissistic personality or a cluster B personality type, they were spoiled as children. So they have a very strong sense of entitlement as adults. So they tend to seek getting their way in all of their relationships. It's unconscious though. Sometimes, yes, it's intentional. If you're the person that was tagged as scapegoat while growing up, more than likely, your partner, who is a cluster B personality type, they don't necessarily have to be a narcissistic personality, but they can be a histrionic or a borderline or antisocial. And they may have been diagnosed. That's another thing I want to point out. Some of us have narcissistic partners or cluster B personality partners, and we don't even know if they were diagnosed by a mental health care practitioner or not. Sometimes the cluster B personality type can be masked by another pathology, such as alcoholism or drug addictions. But when it comes down to seeking what's familiar, this is a phenomenon that I think we really need to pay attention to, because this is how sometimes the narcissist can hook a person in, because the narcissistic partner is very familiar. But at first, they may seem harmless. And then we meet the parents their parents and the rest of the family members, which seems strangely familiar. It's almost like they're a carbon copy of our own family that we grew up in. So even when it spreads out to not just the in-laws, but the sister of your narcissistic partner, the brother, the siblings of your narcissistic partner, it's almost like it's a carbon copy of your family that you grew up in. How you were treated in your family, you're being treated in your narcissistic partner's family. It's just like it's a carbon copy. This is why I said it's pretty eerie to me. Now, how can one break the pattern? How can one interrupt the pattern? How can one protect themselves? So how does one break the cycle? Again, this is not something that you're doomed to continue to repeat. But first, it takes awareness. Take a look at how you're feeling. What type of thought patterns come up for you when you're dealing with your partner's parents or the in-laws? If you're married to this narcissistic partner, even if you're not, this still applies. You may be co-parenting. Just take a good look at what's going on in the relationship. How are you feeling? Is it very familiar to you? When you grew up, are you feeling the same things within the narcissistic relationship with your partner? Are you feeling the same things? The anxiety, the depression, are you having some of the same thoughts? Are you feeling like that little girl or that little boy that's not being treated well? If this is what's going on, yeah, that means that you have been experiencing some of the same things that you have experienced.